Rob just joined us, and so I think we're ready.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I will call, this is Arthur Gasparo, Chair of the Traffic Safety Advisory Work Group, and I'll call this meeting to order at 10:30 um, on August 20th, and we are meeting remotely per Governor Baker's orders and in accordance with those orders. The first order of business is we've called to order. Is there any public comment for items that are not on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to official business. The first was for review of no parking along portions of Joy Street, which had been tabled from July of 2020, July 23rd. And we had requested from the planning staff a map and some suggestions for where parking could be done, where no parking could be done along this road. But unfortunately, we did not receive anything from them. And I see that Ms. Barrett is on again, and we do appreciate your input here. Perhaps you could reach out again to Andrew Vorse, because he hasn't responded to us in terms of trying to get something put together for where the no parking could be. So
Okay, I can reach out to him.
From the Barretts, so suggested that we're 70 feet back from the corner. I can see it there because of them and their trucks coming to town. That's a very tight turn no matter which way they turn there. So they would need that on that corner.
all sheet. This is the graphic that was submitted, and we certainly could consider and discuss this. I think we had wondered or had some discussion last time whether there could be a little more study to make sure we're doing it on the appropriate side. But seeing where I also don't want to see that this just gets in a bit of a limbo for you for, an awfully long time. I would open it up to committee discussion whether or not there would be any support for the proposal that is on the table, or whether the feeling of a majority of the work group is that further study and more, comprehensive maps should be provided in terms of exactly where parking could be allowed and not allowed. And we say that, I think, in relation to primarily driveways, as they may, exist on either side. For example, on the side that shows to have parking, you're going to have areas where there are existing driveways that you wouldn't have parking in front of those. And then there's a chance, what we found in the past, that road may be wide enough, but often when there's then a driveway on the opposite side of where we allow parking, we have to sometimes then eliminate parking there. So while I think it may look like we would end up having parking along that entire east side, in fact, it may then get cut down even further. And I would open it up to discussion for the work group members at this point.
All right, Bob Bates here real quick. Do we have to have parking on that street? It appears that every house on the street has driveways.
That's a good question. Though, typically there is some overflow. I guess the question would be, do we really need to eliminate it completely to maintain access? And if we don't, would we want to go from having parking on both sides to no side? And so that would be my thought, but I think that's a fair question and open for discussion. Anybody else to that point or any other point? Ms. Barrett, I'll go through work group members first, and then I'll take your question. Does anyone else on the work group have any discussion on this matter?
If we were going to put no parking there, I'd put the no parking on the west side.
As shown on the sketch.
East. I think you're better off there as far as the year-round houses and whatnot. You got the year-round houses on the other side.
Just so that I'm clear, you would propose it the way that it's shown?
Right, yeah.
Okay. Ms. Barrett?
My only comment was when you were talking about, parking on one side and then having someone come out of a driveway, just keep in mind that currently this entire street has parking except for the very beginning on one side. So even now, if someone goes to pull out of a driveway, there's parking across from the driveway. So there's no designation of no parking. So it might be a non-issue that people are able to get in and out of the driveways as it currently is. So by changing it to what we're proposing might not have an effect. But, I kind of like Bob's idea there. If no parking at all would be even better, because I still think with parking on one side, there could be some choke points anyway, but it would be better than having, the zigzag with a long truck trying to get through there the way it's been this summer. It's just been worse than ever.
I understand.
If we were going to eliminate parking in its entirety, we might have to have a public hearing at the select board for that.
Maybe we take it incrementally, to start off and see if this actually helps what's before us, and then if it still doesn't accomplish what needs to be, essentially the flow of traffic with the semis on the designated truck route, then we could go another step further. Would be what I would favor. But again, I'll open it up to any further discussion or a motion. We could either take action on the graphic as proposed. We could make a modification to no parking either side, or we could table for further study from the planning department. Or I think what are the options before us?
So what is it you're proposing there, that no parking on one side then?
Yeah, the proposal before us is no parking on the west side. I'm not sure if you can see the screen that I'm sharing or not. No parking on the west side, parking on the east side, and no parking on either side within 70 feet of Prospect Street.
I'll make a motion to approve that and see where it goes.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the matter? Hearing none, we have to do a roll call vote. I'm going to stop sharing this for just a second, just to make this a little easier on me. So roll call vote, Mr. Bates,
Aye.
Mr. Gardner,
Yes.
Mr. Pittman,
No.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. McNeil.
No.
Sorry, what was that?
No. And the chair votes no. I think that we need the more study. So that would go
So that's 3-3.
3.
Are we missing a member? Why is there an even number?
No, I think we have everybody.
You never replaced Mike Barnes. That's the one you're missing.
Yep,
Right.
you're
Mr.
missing a member.
Mr. Rowland?
Yeah, Art, I was just going to say that I can change my vote to no, just to get us a little bit more.
I don't think it matters.
You don't have to. It doesn't carry on the tie. So at this point, it would go back to planning, hopefully, for further study of where parking could be allowed and not allowed.
So you want me to reach out to Andrew?
I think that would be helpful.
Okay, I can do that.
Perhaps copy the town manager. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next agenda item. We have a review of the plan of the Washington Street, Francis Street, and Union Street intersection improvements. And this has been carried forward from a previous meeting. And I made my work group packet, but it didn't actually capture this entire plan. Erica, do you happen to have this plan that you could share? I could try to redo it, but. Okay, so thank you very much. So this is the plan that's been developed through multiple, I think, meetings and revisions between DPW, planning, a select board member. I know I had a meeting out there, and the proposal on the plan before us essentially is to make improvements to both the intersection at Francis Street and Union, as well as Francis and Washington Street. Starting on the south and moving north at Francis Street, there would be a new 8-inch brick crosswalk that would be flush with granite curb and thermoplastic edging, as well as a mountable flush Belgian block surface. Also would be mountable by the larger vehicles that needed that turning radius there. We would get rid of the crosswalk that's at the mid block right now coming out of the senior center, and improve the sidewalks on both sides. To the north at the intersection with Washington Street, there'd be a new brick sidewalk, and then there would also be a mountable surface, and there would be stop controls at Francis Street heading north and Washington Street heading west, while the traffic would be able to free flow the eastbound traffic to either make the turn onto Francis or to proceed onto Washington Street. There's also a sidewalk proposed along the edge of the 77 Washington Street property, though there are some, I believe, easement issues there that need to be acquired in order for that piece of things to happen. So that's just been noted on the plan. I do understand that there are discussions in the works for that, but I thought that it was important to note that I don't think that that could be done, as I understand it, at this point until that can take care of. But it is, I think, a good idea to include it on the plan, and hopefully, that those type of items could get worked out. And then there would be the green bicycle sharrows heavily placed on the road to really try to direct the bicycle traffic forward. And then the stop signs would have the additional language below them in terms of which traffic does not stop. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Mr. McNeil, who has worked extensively on this, in case I missed anything or there's anything you wanted to add.
Thanks, Art. You actually covered it very well. So thanks for that. And thanks for making the time in the field to review this. This has been through several iterations. The thought was to sort of mirror the improvements envisioned at Washington and Francis over on Union, particularly with the flush Belgian block mountable area, to really distinguish the lane configurations, as all of us have seen. People coming into Union Street heading eastbound tend to cheat over. And in some cases, you end up with a situation trying to get a truck going westbound. And anyway, that's going to be helpful. On the north side at Washington Francis, we have taken the striping plan that they had proposed with the sharrows, and you've seen those out there now. We've actually brought that to bear this summer with the thermoplastic sharrows, just to really see if with just pavement markings alone, we could encourage more bikes to be utilizing the in-town bike path at the end of Washington Street Extension. And I'm happy to report that while I do still see an occasional straggling bike heading out of town on the, let's say on the less preferred route on the road, they are using and seeing that. I think it has done its job as far as raising awareness and directing bikes to use the new path. So that is good. The sidewalk on Washington Street Extension, I don't believe is critical to the improvements, where most of because there's so little traffic on Washington Street Extension. Mike Burns has measured the volumes, and it's less than, I believe it's less than 4% of the overall traffic through that intersection is coming and going on Washington Street Extension. So for the time being, pedestrians are walking past 77 in the street. And while we certainly are committed to connecting the sidewalk to the sidewalk on Washington Street Extension, my thought would be to proceed with the proposed improvements, at least the surface treatments, as we continue to work with the homeowner there to bring that to bear. So this is the surface treatments. We haven't even got into the subsurface utility work, but this is really critical in the piece to be able to move forward with a recommendation to the select board. And that's what we're looking for.
Thank you.
Approval here.
I know if I may, if we could just hold 1 second, Jack, that Mr. Rowland had some questions or comments on this. So if we could maybe have a discussion. Mickey, would you like to, I can share my screen. Would you like to just go over sort of what you mentioned to me?
Yeah, so my concern with this proposal is that it doesn't seem to address the sort of the current safety issue that I see that's present now, where the cars leaving town want to go, the ones that want to go straight down Washington Street Extension, they just, they have no reason to stop or slow down or even signal which way they're going. So there's that concern about, pedestrian safety, bike safety for those cars that are doing that. And I went back and looked at the earlier proposals, and concept one on the screen there, where it shows more of a kind of a T intersection, with Washington Street Extension. It puts a curve in the path of the cars leaving town, so that they would have to slow down. And then to go onto Washington Street Extension, it feels more like a left-hand turn rather than just going straight. I would probably put, another stop sign or two there to make it a 2 or 3-way intersection, just to really slow things down. But, one of my concerns about the current proposal is there's a really long crosswalk going right through that intersection, leaving pedestrians in the middle of that intersection for a while. They're out there in the middle of the street in rushing traffic. I don't know, to me, the concept one feels like a safer solution, and yet addresses the concerns that I think we're trying to do to get the trucks to turn easier. Those are my comments.
Thanks. I would respond and then open it up to further discussion. I think that the geometry of this concept would be very challenging in the field, and that it also, I think that the other concept that now adds, more bold type of features to direct the bicyclists, over to Washington Street, that when we look, this is my feeling on this, is that when we look at the overall safety of people using the bike route out Francis and Union, that if we can get the bicyclists, as many as possible, onto Washington and onto the railroad bed path, that really is also a factor in considering the overall safety of the concept before us. And that this particular concept doesn't really, as I see it, do a good job of directing the bicyclists that are eastbound over onto Washington Street. And I think that would be very challenging with this particular layout. And then I think that coming out of Washington Street into a curve, a very, it's uncommon type of geometric arrangement, I think, there personally. And then the other point would be whether or not, and it's almost a separate point of discussion for, I think, whether it's this concept or the other, stop control is required on the eastbound traffic. And I had the same comment on my initial review, though looking at it more personally, I don't think that it is. I think it's challenging to where that stop control would be located, and that putting the additional language signage below the other stop signs should hopefully help with that, as well as having such large, bold type crosswalks that are not just painted and done in brick. Hopefully, I see the eastbound traffic continuing to kind of flow around the corner, but that the traffic that's either going to continue straight on to Washington Street or the traffic going north from Francis Street should hopefully be, more cognizant and slowed down at that location personally. But I will open it up to, I don't think that any of that we're ever going to achieve absolute perfection on a situation such as this. And that is, we're trying to get it as, do the best that we can. I personally support the other concept that is before us, but I am certainly open to further discussion on Mr. Rowland's comments, as well as any other ideas that any other work group members may have.
The bike path getting across there, I think if you get the proper signage and everything in there and get the bikes painted in the road like we have other areas this year, I think you can get the bike straight across the end of Francis Street.
And I would add on this other concept that this kind of a curve out and back in for, I know it's a low volume, but for westbound traffic, that's, combining with people coming around, I would see a conflict myself right there, as well as then you're trying to get people to come over through here as people are coming out through here. I almost wonder if that would be worse.
Right.
Anyone else have any further discussion on this concept or?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Bates.
The larger trucks would have difficulty going down Washington Street Extension for delivery purposes with that set up that way. And I think going into town on Francis Street, it would be more difficult. Because you're cutting down on their ability to swing a little wider if they have to with traffic.
Okay.
If they could go to the right more, and then if they were to need to go to the right a little more and then be able to make the swing as they do now, a lot of the truckers are still going to need to, well, the geometry of what was being proposed by the town has the right swing and everything. This might reduce that swing and the ability for them to easily make that corner.
Okay. Do we want to go back to, let me see. Erica, you want to put the other concept back up on the screen, if you would, please?
The only other question I have, and I know it's for the underground utility portion, is there's a hydrant on that existing corner. Is that going to be maintained on that corner?
And that'd be moved anyway.
Right, but that's really the only hydrant for that area. We can't, it would be difficult for us to lose that and still be able to maintain good fire safety.
Where is that, Bob?
If it's right on the corner of Francis and Washington, be on the west side, yeah, right in there where the arrow is. There's a hydrant there now. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it back and keep it, they can pull it back and keep it on the sidewalk or do whatever, because that's where it is now, is on the sidewalk. But that's the only hydrant in that whole area.
Yeah, they'd have to pull it back to the fence line.
Is there a preference? I mean, basically, we can put it where we need it. So if there's a preference by the fire department, let us know and we'll make sure it goes there.
I'm almost wondering if we moved it to the Washington Street Extension, Francis Street intersection on the, yeah, right where Art just said, we're right where that arrow is now, where Eric has the arrow now, right in that area. That way, if we're using it to go down Washington Street Extension, we wouldn't be as impactful on traffic. I mean, if we're on Washington Street headed towards town, it's going to be a negative impact no matter what. But if we were to have to lay across Francis Street and Washington Street to use Washington Street Extension, it would really be a negative impact on all traffic flow down there.
There's already a utility pole right here at the corner.
Right.
And then
Okay.
having a hydrant there as well, not only is it gonna impact the actual pedestrian flow over here, it could, with this stop bar so far back, I think it's gonna be so hard to even see around this corner, the way that this property has been developed and with that pole.
Okay, I didn't know if that pole might be moving as part of this project. That's,
I have no idea if that's part of
Okay.
the proposal.
so then it would probably have to stay on the left-hand side, on the western side of the street somewhere near that corner.
Yeah, we'll certainly coordinate that when we start doing the utility design, Bob.
Thank you.
Is there a motion on the table? Or any? Mr. Gardner, you had started to make a motion earlier. Did we lose?
Jack move to approve it.
Right.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to a roll call vote. Mr. Bates?
Aye.
Mr. Gardner?
Aye.
Roland?
I'm going to say no.
Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
Pittman?
Yes.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. We have a request from the land bank for a request for, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. First, it's a request for a curb cut eliminating on-street parking at 10 Beach Street in Codfish Park. And I see that Mr. Malloy has joined us. So I'd be happy to turn it over to you if you'd like to present the application, and perhaps Erica, if you could share the plan. Helpful.
I think if Eric, if you share the one with the aerial, it'd be clearer. Perfect. Good morning, Dan Malloy, Site Design Engineering for the applicants. So 10B Beach Street up in Codfish Park, existing dwelling on the site. The property has no driveway now. They're in the middle of permitting reconstruction of the building with HDC. And as part of that process, I'd like to have a driveway with on-site parking. So the question now is what impact will be allowable in terms of on-street parking? So there's about half the property has a yellow line across the front for no on-street parking, and you can see a car in the picture where there is on-street parking. And the question is, with whatever curb cut they're allowed to put in, whether it stays where it's shown or it moves to the left, there will be some level of impact both to the allowed parking and not allowed. So right now, I think it's getting us in front of you, getting your thoughts on it in terms of what the impacts would be, what's acceptable, what's not, so we can go back and make revisions to this plan.
Thank you. I'll open this up to comments from work group members.
Rob? Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
As the picture as they show it is rather vague. The way it's drawn now, there's really very limited impact, but if they move it to the left, it will have significant impact on the on-street parking. I think they would need to really define that more before a decision could be made.
Perhaps we could keep the plan up, Eric, or I could see everybody on the side thing. It might just help.
So if you look at the plan, the proposed driveway's in gray,
Yes.
and you'll see the car in the street. So right about in the middle of the site, right there is where the yellow line starts going left. So there's no on-street parking right now to the left. So either we have to look at, we can consider moving the proposed apron to the left to have a lesser impact on the on-street parking. But no matter how much we move it, part of it, I think, whether it's 5 feet, 10 feet, we're still going to impact to some degree the on-street parking that's allowed.
And Dan, do you see this as one off-street parking spot with the backing and turnaround, or would you be proposing this as 2 off-street parking spaces?
Well, realistically, they could fit 2 cars. Ideally, with everything being so narrow, the intent would be able to turn around, back up on one end and pull out. The street's narrow with cars parking, so ideally they can turn around on site.
So the reason I ask is that the general policy of the work group, it has been, when it comes to eliminating public on-street parking for off-street parking, that the applicant should demonstrate that there's an overall net gain of spaces. That is, if a space is lost on street, then there should be 2 spaces created on site. And, perhaps if this was, and I think that there's also a case to discuss that there's the yellow line being impacted is not an entire space. So I think there's 2 ways this could be looked at. One would be that, how much is how many spaces would be lost by this? And right now it appears to me that it would be 1. But it's not clear whether there would be 1 or 2 conforming spaces on the property. And we had an application recently where the applicant also used the reduced size as the second space. And so maybe if that was demonstrated, it may help to meet the policy, if you would, showing that that there's a gain. In other words, you're getting 2 cars off the street that would have otherwise taken that public space. And I do tend to agree. I wonder if the slide over or almost a mirror of what you have there so that it was under the yellow line might almost be a wash. You might, in order to.
Right. So the option, so we have about 46 feet in length to work with right to left. So we could have 2 dimensional spaces there that would fit. It would make it difficult to back out and turn around, but it is doable. If we mirrored it, we'd still have the same length to work with. But if we did mirror it, I would think we'd push it as far left as possible. So it would be almost entirely inside the yellow line, try to eliminate the conflict. By doing that, we would remove the ability to turn around. So it's if we leave it somewhere in the middle, we can likely turn around on the site. If we shift it to the left, we can still have 2 spaces. However, we'll have to back out to the street.
Okay, thank you for that. I would open it up to discussion for the work group, whether they would favor the application as shown, as possibly revised, as described, or cut at all that impacts the public space. I think those are the 3 items for discussion. Does anybody have any comment?
Mr. Chair, I would say, to me, it appears, and I'm not sure what's planned for the house itself. It looks like there's some modifications necessary to be able to build the proposed parking. But I would start with the existing no parking line and simply say that the throat here appears like it could or should be further to the west to basically be positioned specifically where there currently is no parking allowed, to not lose any on-street parking. It seems like there's adequate space to be able to take care of that there. And whether the on-street parking, off-street parking rather, is perpendicular, designed perpendicular like the neighbor, in concert with the proposed existing dwelling modifications. I mean, that'd be something to work out with the homeowner.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments on this? Mr. Malloy, would you care to respond? I mean, is there a reason you couldn't come straight in where the yellow line is?
Yeah, so looking at the property, you see the existing house. On the left or the west side of the house is where the building is essentially being rebuilt. And then on the right side and the east is where the septic system is. We can't drive over that. So we're somewhat fixed. Turn that off, sorry.
So are you saying there's not 9 feet between the westerly property line and the existing building?
On the west side, the owners are building, the house is being rebuilt. So the existing footprint will remain, it's being expanded to the west. So that area where you could pull straight in like the neighbor is going to be building.
Right, so it's an expansion into this area that would prohibit the parking in that arrangement.
Right. Pretty much where we're showing the parking is the only place that's physically available.
Hey, Art or Dan, could I ask, has the HTC approved the demolition and the new proposed work yet?
I believe it's still under review.
Okay.
We're not in a rush to try to get this approved this morning. So really just looking to get everybody's feedback and see what we can do to revise this and then come back to you.
Mr. Chair, I just want to add to this discussion. You know, oftentimes we get stuck with approvals from various departments that have already come down. And this is another classic case of being shown part of the situation, not the whole picture. I think it would be very helpful, as we've gotten in the past, is when we get a submission that it shows the entire proposed development, and so we can picture the entire thing at once. The other piece to this is, you know, if they're looking for off-street parking, that, from where I sit, in my opinion, it should consider the redevelopment of the property in its entirety. And so if it's more advantageous to be able to do the driveway and no loss of on-street parking configuration, and that requires modifications to the building plans, then so be it.
So is there a motion, or Dan, would you prefer that this be tabled and you make a modification?
Well, I think I'd rather it be just continued so I can modify the plans. It sounds like, generally speaking, at least, I'm not sure if it's the majority, but at least the consideration is to try to move it to the west to impact the yellow line where there's no street parking now. And then back
And bring a full plan next time.
that can certainly include
Big plan.
wherever status the building plans out with HTC, include that as well.
Okay, so we'll table this matter to the September meeting. Thank you.
So moved.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have a review to request for elimination of an on-street parking space adjacent to the Land Bank Codfish Park playground. And the Land Bank sent in some correspondence as well as photos. The concern is that when folks are parking in that area, and it presents a safety hazard for pedestrians entering and exiting the park through the walkway that's shown in both the aerial and we have a photo. And so if there was, one space removed so that a vehicle couldn't be in the space that's essentially immediately to the north of the entrance to the playground, it should improve sight distances for both pedestrians as well as drivers in that area. And with that, I would open that up to discussion should any members have any comments. I believe we also have Mr. Savetsky here, should he wish to comment. Any work?
I'd like to see just one parking place there rather than the two.
To eliminate one space.
Right, yes.
Is that correct, Mr. Savetsky?
I'm standing in for Rachel, but I believe the request was for more like 50 feet, I want to say. The other problem that's happening is people are blocking a curb cut to a lot which folks above the bank own. I think I sent you a photograph of the area. I don't know if you were able to.
Yeah, I can screen share that. Erica, can I? Oh, hold on one second. I'm sorry. I just received this. I'm just trying to make it so that it's usable here.
So
here it is. Sorry.
So I don't think one parking space will eliminate the blind spot for cars leaving Codfish Park as they drive out. So there's the curb cut for the lot next door to us. So I think our request was from the curb cut down to the playground, stripe that as no parking with signage to avoid people coming out of the park and out in front of cars, parked cars, into where cars are coming out of Codfish Park driving and can't see the people exiting the park on foot.
Quick question, is this the lot directly next door to the park? Because I don't believe a curb cut has come to us to even allow this.
It is directly abutting the park, and it's actually a vacant lot, but the folks above the bank own this, and as you can see, they
my point is, it's an illegal curb cut. It hasn't been requested, as far as I know. Rob, do you know? I mean, nothing's come forward to request to eliminate. We haven't gotten anything to allow a curb cut, thus eliminating on-street parking here.
Yes, correct. We have not, so DPW is not aware of a curb cut.
So as far as we're concerned, that is allowed parking until they come forward.
Regarding, Mr. Chair, regarding the specific application,
Yes.
I would support extending the no parking line to the south side of this pictured opening, sort of opposite the post that the chain is attached to accomplish a similar type of effect. I've been out there as recently as this past weekend, and I agree with the land bank. I've talked to Rachel on this several times, and it certainly, depending on the time of the activity, there is a tremendous amount of bicycle, pedestrian, and vehicle activity in this area. So it certainly would benefit the park with regard to small children coming and going from there and getting into vehicles or walking down to the beach even, to increase sight distance at the entrance and exit to the park. So I would support this.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the matter? Is that a motion, Mr. McNeil?
Sure, I'll make a motion to extend the yellow no parking line to the post on the south side as pictured.
I'll second that.
The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to a roll call vote. Mr. Bates,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Pittman,
Yes.
Mr. Gardner,
Yes.
and chair votes aye as well.
Art, can you send me that picture, please? Because I need it for the
I will.
file. Thank
I
you.
will.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Eric. Moving on, I think I closed my file, sorry. We have a request to post a portion of Starbuck Road as no parking out in Matticat.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just as a point of order, I wanted to reach out to Erica and say, maybe we could at the same time send a notice out to the abutter there with regard to his or her illegal curb cut, and maybe get that on an agenda coming up.
I'll talk to Ken about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree. And moving on to Starbuck Road. Okay, Erica's bringing up the screen, and the proposal before us is this is a result of overflow parking, or just simply parking, I guess I would say, in our overflow for access to the beach out there. And there's been some concern raised. I don't know if we have anyone who's joined us. Let me just check the participants. I don't see anybody here from the public or to represent this.
And they were invited.
Thank you. And they would like no parking signs installed, and are also concerned with emergency access through this area. And with that, I would open it up to discussion from the work group members. I guess I could start from a fire perspective. Does the fire department feel that the parking along this road jeopardizes public safety and ability to get through there?
Bob,
Mr. Bates, are you with us?
we're talking to you.
Sorry, I was muted for a second. Do we know what the width of the street was with the parking there?
I don't know what it is off the top of my head, no.
Right, because as I look at the emails that came in, they're more like we couldn't get out of our property and this and that. It doesn't discuss the actual width of the road. I think we need to get an idea as to what the width is when there's vehicles parked there.
Could fire do a drive-by and see?
I can try to do that this afternoon. There might be some vehicles parked out there, so I could do that since it is a beach day.
And so it sounds to me that it may be a good idea to table this for further review, though before we do that, is there any other discussion or concerns in general that the work group members may have with either posting all of this as no parking or taking no action, or any other information that we may want to consider for the next hearing?
Sure. I would throw out there simply, just clarify for me, if you would, the request for the consideration of no parking on Starbuck is coming from the residents, not from the land trust. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm curious because I've only been here a minute, but has there been discussion in the past about developing the parking on the trust property? I believe it's on the trust property, developing that parking lot out more similar to what's being considered in Matacasham Valley. It is and I guess, Chief, you could weigh in on if that area is used by the lifeguards or patrols for access. But I believe this was an area that has been identified for beach access if Ames Avenue ever disappears.
I don't know the answer to that.
Erica, if I may, or through Art, how many people requested this?
I believe it was one, but they seem to refer to their other neighbors, as I recall.
Okay. All right, it
I think we
seems
ought to take a look at this for next month.
Yeah. Okay, I'd be very interested to see, how fire and public safety feel about, whether this actually is, impedes their ability to access, the beach or the houses, or if it's more of a matter of, convenience situation. Okay, so
Yeah, I went out there, yes. I can get the car through all right, but I think maybe a big fire truck had trouble getting through there.
And then to Mr. McNeil's comments, I guess, perhaps we could investigate if the Mattocket Land Trust has any intentions or interest in expanding, going through whatever it would take to expand the parking on that piece of property.
That's a good idea.
Okay. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have a request to post the entirety of Trotters Lane and Parker Lane as no parking. And I made the two graphics, which are in the packet, though I also could bring up, it may be easier if I bring up an aerial just on my screen, which could be zoomed in and out. And I'll share this in 1 second. So, Parker, right. Let me share my screen. Okay, so we have Parker Lane here. I guess we should take these separately. Residents have, or a resident has requested that this be posted as no parking. Anybody have any comments or discussion on this matter? And I take it that the general concern is, we had an email from him, correct? That you can't, there's cars near the intersections and a lot of development. So it does seem to me, at a minimum, that we should make sure that there are yellow lines within 20 feet of each intersection in compliance with the current regulations. So
Right.
that would be, here, here, and here, here. And then the discussion. So I think that should be done regardless, personally. And that whether or not the committee feels there should be a recommendation to the select board for elimination of the parking, one side or both sides or anything else.
Yeah, it seems to be some problem with maybe some of those houses have taken in some roomers or whatnot, and they got the extra cars during the summertime. In the winter, it doesn't seem that bad.
Just Bob Bates, I have come through, living in that area, I have come through there and had literally half a lane at the Parker Hooper Farm intersection before, due to workers and people that are living there. I've actually had to call dispatch about that.
Right.
So would you favor then a complete restriction or restriction on one side? table this for further study. And so, you know, we're hearing a concern from fire. Is there any other discussion or concern, Mr. Pittman?
Yeah, my only concern is you eliminate parking on that street. Then it becomes a speed problem. You know, it's going to be one or the other we're going to deal with. The thing about cars parked there is it does slow the traffic down considerably. And I think the biggest part of it is from the construction that's going on around that area right now.
Art, can I just make one note to piggyback on what Chief just said?
Yes.
Parker Lane also, traffic safety reviewed Parker Lane, I want to say 2 years ago.
Right.
Because one of the owners of the property was saying how fast people were going down here and they wanted slow children signs and what could be done to slow the speeding down, which we did put in 20-mile-an-hour slow children signs on this stretch of the road. I don't think it always, you know, people are speeding all over the place. I think it really is. There's so much development and construction going on both of these roads right now. Every parcel is being built out.
Any other comments?
Maybe we could go no parking one side and see if that helps it out.
Is that a motion or is there any further discussion to that? Personally, I would support starting with the 20 feet from each intersection, but.
Mr. Chair, I was going to offer that, DPW as a first measure here could certainly install the 20-foot intersection lines, both sides on both of these roads. And that typically could serve as a reminder to people that these need to be opened up. And oftentimes the message then gets to others that are using the street to park on for convenience, even if just temporary for a construction project. It sort of helps raise awareness that, oh yeah, we need to allow for people to get through here. So I'm happy to take that on and turn that into an action.
And Art, can I say one more thing? I take either one of these roads almost every day going to and from work. Parker Lane, I would say, is mainly on the left-hand side, closer down to Hooper Farm Road, because there are current development projects down at that end. You know, these first like 4 lots have been done, but I would say for the most part, there's really no other on-street parking that's happening on this road. When you go to Trotters, it's everywhere.
Okay, so Parker first, is the consensus of the work group that we would start off with the DPW action to install the yellow lines 20 feet in, or does someone have a different motion?
I think that's a good idea. I think we got to do the same thing on Trotters, because in the middle of Trotters, you have a little road going off there, and you can do it on that little road too.
So here. On Trotters.
Right.
As well as over here.
Right, yeah. So that way we get some more yellow lines on Trotters that go.
I guess that's true on Parker too. We could do here.
Right, right, because you have Gray Avenue coming off there. You get 2 yellow lines there. Yeah, let's do the yellow lines on the corners first and see how it works out.
So
one thing I am noticing is, obviously the GIS is not the gospel, but oh my encroachments. If these roads, if these road widths are actually even close to being accurate, there are a ton of encroachments, and maybe DPW wants to consider putting a couple of these crossroads on their future survey schedules, especially if on-street parking is needed. You know, I mean, you could easily create on-street parking that's off of the roadway if the road is indeed wide enough for that.
Those were all 40-foot layouts. They were.
Right.
Those roads were all gifts to the town. They didn't go through the planning board at all.
All right, I'll make a motion to have DPW install 20-foot no parking lines, both sides at all the intersections along Parker and Trotters.
Second that.
Thank you. So the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Roll call vote. I have to stop sharing. Sorry, 1 second. Mr. Bates,
Aye.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Pittman,
Yes.
Mr. Gardner.
Yes.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. That was the last item, action item on the agenda. And then we had, I believe, review approval of the minutes from July 23rd. Are there any comments on the minutes? Hearing none, we'll consider those adopted by unanimous consent. Did anyone have any other business to bring forward for this meeting or for a future agenda item? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I think we need a motion and then a second.
Oh.
I'll make a motion.
Motion to adjourn. Yeah, second.
So motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Bates,
Aye.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Pittman,
Yes.
Mr. Gardner.
Yes.
Chair votes aye. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Bye.
Thank you.